So now that we've gotten all that out of our system, it's time to be deeply compassionate with ourselves and with everyone in this room and everyone out of the four corners of this room into the four corners of the earth, above and below, to just breathe in compassion.
Hi there. Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Don Estes. Hi, Don.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to join, Dave. Appreciate
Welcome,
it.
welcome. Don is a neuroscientist, certified medical technologist, and director of InnerSense, Inc., a unique fusion of science, engineering, and philosophy of inner transformation. He's been featured in hundreds of media presentations and lectured worldwide on sensory science and how it relates to consciousness. In the early 80s, he released his first technology called vibrasound, a hydrosonic wavetable that transduces any audio signal into vibrotactile vibrations that can be felt in every cell of the body. He's built and managed facilities all over the world that help others achieve peak states of mind that can lead to healing, expanded consciousness, and spiritual growth. He currently lives up in the mountains of Santa Monica. Santa Monica Mountains above Malibu, and he's really happy about it. What have you been up to lately?
Just writing this book and making this presentation. I just wrote a new book called Reality, the White Paper, where I've just realized that everything that we talk about here is really related to reality, the frequencies and everything. And you've seen my chart about how it combines a relative reality of the frequencies with the absolute realities of how what originated it and its destiny and all that stuff, sort of stuff. So it's all kind of connected together for me now to where I just want to call it reality therapy instead of sound therapy.
I love it. Okay, if you have all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
I think I would continue going the way we're going right now. We have our new showroom and therapy center in Santa Monica called the Reality Center. And now we have another one in Miami, and we just put one in Dubai. We have some in Japan. So we're beginning to spread those things out around the world. Since all of this is such experiential kind of thing, it's hard to really talk about it and really get that across with people. But once they actually experience it, all the questions kind of go away. So that's really what I would do if I had all the money in the world to do this. I would open up more and more of these kinds of centers to where people could actually experience it. And we could, I believe, really, if we had like 5 years and one of these kind of centers in pretty much every city, we could dramatically change the world.
Excellent. Excellent. Cool.
So again, thank you all very much for joining me in this presentation. It's really an honor to participate in this conference. And my company, InnerSense, was incorporated in 1981 and dedicated to the research, development, and distribution of transformational technology. In addition, it was also dedicated to a process called alasso, which is an ancient Greek term that means helping others transform from an evolutionary physical material creature into an eventuated spiritual essence, which is the purpose and meaning and goal of life. Basically, that describes who we want to be when we pass over to the other side. And I wonder why not just be there now? So that's really what I'm shooting for is to help people make that transformation to becoming an eventuated spiritual essence. This conference is based on the various aspects of sound, but I would like to expand that to the concept that sound is just one small slice of the universal vibrational spectrum we call reality, which is a scale of relative frequencies that stretches from the quantum constant to the gravity constant and held together by absolute forces. So, to be complete, this sound therapy that we're talking about really has to include all of the bands of vibration. Now, this is a full chart, full diagram that shows how physical reality is experienced as a flow of relative uh, cosmic frequencies that begin here at the quantum constant and slow down into the gravity constant. So everything that we know is relative by frequency, and it's shown by this chart here. It shows how the absolute uh, energies of the universe are holding on to this relative channel. This basic chart kind of shows not only the frequencies, it shows 10 bands of reality. So you can see here the bands. We've got uh, potential that becomes force that slows down into particles that form atoms that come together to form molecules that, and then cells and tissues. And each one of these groupings has to go through 7 stages of process before it jumps to the next level of order. So there's a lot of information on this chart that shows how everything is relative by frequency. You've actually seen this chart many times before, but you've always seen it kind of like this. And this is the chart that they used to show us in school. And I was always curious as to about how it doesn't seem like reality would just chop this off on both ends. Nobody's ever talked about how does this thing end on, how does this scale end on both ends? And so basically what I've done is just take these two ends and wrap them back together like this. So instead of having a linear cycle like this, you have this circular cycle to where it really creates a cycle and a pattern. This is another diagram that basically shows that electromagnetic spectrum. And you can see here that at one end, it kind of drops off at radio frequencies, and at the other end, it goes into cosmic frequencies. But again, where does this thing end? I was just, all my life, I've been really curious about that until I've made these latest discoveries. And one of the points that I was trying to point out earlier is that sound is just this really small sliver of reality that's packed in between all these other frequencies. So you have all these other frequencies going on, but the sound is just one little small aspect of it. What we want to really get down to is that how does this thing end on the big scale? So down here you can see the sound again. There's a piano right there with 92 keys on it. So this is pretty much the part of reality that we're talking about here, which is sound. But you can see all this other things going on that are relative to the sound, but we miss it when we're only talking about just sound. And a lot of you have gotten to the point that you're beginning to realize that this is true, that the vibrational spectrum continues both ways around the sound. So this is the light octave right here, and you can see it's just one small little sliver of reality as well. But in order to uh, use all of this technology or all of this spectrum, then we have to spread out into the other bands beyond just sound so that a person sees it and feels it at the same time. Now, I just became obsessed with knowing how does that chart end? How does it terminate at both ends? And science is sort of beginning to understand it, that at one end, it starts with the quantum constant, and at the other end, it becomes the gravity constant. And this is the big deal going on with physics right now. Somebody trying, or people trying to come up with the theory of everything that explains how the quantum and gravity actually relate to each other. But they're having a hard time doing it because they're trying to do that from the relative scale of frequencies instead of looking at the absolute realities that actually hold gravity and the quantum together. My own research with this has basically shown how these ends really become personal and impersonal. So at one end of this scale, over here, this is the wholeness of something. And as you start to break it down into all of its parts, you get back over to the smallest indivisible component of it, and which is impersonal. So another thing I realized is that this division between these two ends can be discussed as the whole versus the parts, or you could say it's the free will versus the machine, or you could say it's the programmer versus the computer, or this is one of my favorites, the player versus the instrument. So a human being is a musical instrument, but we're also the player of it. So the wholeness of it as ourselves, and the instrument of it is the thing that the temple that we live inside of. I think the easiest way to understand these two extremes is if we call the real the actual and the potential becomes the imaginary. So uh, that just leads us to this next thing about what in the world is reality. Again, as I said earlier, I know we're here to talk about sound, but since we determined that it's more or less everything we know, we might better consider using another term like vibrational therapy instead of just sound therapy. But really, what causes all of these vibrations? And the truth of it, the bottom line of it, what is reality? Reality is energy. It's a triune form of energy, spiritual, mental, and physical energies. It's a pure, undifferentiated spiritual energy that exists eternally at the center of all things, and which through its own will and volition descends out of the throne of the center into space as a relative spectrum of vibrational frequencies to create physical energy. But then the difference in the tension between those two polarities is resolved by an associate form of energy called mental reality. Therefore, reality has this triune nature of spiritual, mental, and physical. Now, the flow of this relative frequencies represent the origin and the history and destiny of all that is. And it continues and ascends and reaches destiny at the end of the cycle, where it comes back in contact with the absolute domain of reality. This triunity that we're talking about, um, that's shown here, is you can see that I've come up with a lot of different ways of showing this triunity. Pretty much everything we know boils down into these triune realities. And so you can see here's physical, mental, and spiritual realities. But when you look at physical domains, that's the real, the complex, and the imaginary domains. And it basically shows the power and the resolution and the epiphany of it all, and whether it's tangible or intangible or dynamic in between those two. Or when you get into the higher levels of understanding this, you can see that the um, the science behind physical shows the things and the truth, and behind mental it shows philosophy, meanings, and beauty, and the spiritual shows religion, values, and goodness. So we have all of these threenesses that are going on, and that kind of leads us to the next thing is really, where is reality? Where does it exist? Well, it basically exists in the space that we know, that we look at every day and we share. It begins like in a timeless, spaceless, zero-dimensional domain known as Hilbert space by the scientists, which is a metric field of spinning quantum state vectors in superposition. And the universe manifests from a weaving of these potential and actual components that scientists called imaginary and real. Now, the term imaginary can be a little bit misleading because it implies that it really doesn't exist. However, in this sense, it simply means potential. The ratio between the real and the imaginary components, this real to imaginary ratio, is the actual versus the potential partials. And that's what determines the geometry and the shapes of all forms of reality, matter, or universal matter. So you can see here that reality equals the imaginary potential that goes back and forth between potential and actual and creates everything that we know. So, in short, real and imaginary are mathematical terms, not a statement about what physically is physically real or fake, but they're essential for describing how quantum states evolve and interfere with each other. In human terms, real and imaginary become player and instrument. As I mentioned earlier, we live inside of an instrument, but we're also the player of the instrument. That's our personal and impersonal aspects of ourselves. These real and imaginary components are multipliers of the sine and the cosine wave and show how many of each one of these exist within the complex wave at any given moment. We'll talk about that again in a minute. This is basically how I discovered the whole thing about real and imaginary. I was studying this equation right here. This is the standard equation. I didn't make this up. This is the standard equation used by scientists and engineers to show that a complex wave, you could imagine the wave coming down a wire from your stereo to your speaker. That wave that's coming down that wire is a complex wave. It's not a simple wave. It's a complex wave of all of the different frequencies that are there. The drums, the voice, all the instruments, all at the same time. So that complex wave equals the reals times the cosines times the frequency plus the imaginary times the sine wave times the frequency. And being a scientist, I sort of know what sine and cosine are. You probably remember those from school a little bit, even though they didn't really teach us anything that it had to do with waves. They put that in trigonometry somewhere, and they said that it describes triangles and hypotenuse and all those things that they tried to cram down our and cram in our brain that hardly anybody understood. But I sort of understand sine and cosine wave, but what in the world is real and imaginary? I fussed over this for a long time trying to study it, asking experts. I asked mathematical experts. I asked sound engineers and physicists, what are these real and imaginary components? And you know what? They couldn't really answer me. The best I could get from them is that those are mathematical functions that are required to solve that complex wave equation. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense, but where do they come from? How do they result? Nobody could really tell me. So we started really studying this and finally realized what we were talking about earlier. What that is this the difference between the instrument and the player? And if we had say a guitar or a violin here with us and it was just laying over against the wall, it represents the potential of a signal that could make any frequency or any rhythm or anything like that, but it's just laying quiet against the wall until somebody picks it up and starts relating to that over time. And the way I've originally figured this out is that the scientists call this real component the time component, and they call this imaginary component the spectral component. So after thinking it out, it became obvious to me what they're talking about there is the instrument provides the spectral component that what is this potential, and the player describes the real component that is expressed over time as they play with the instrument. And another thing that we realize is that these two things, these real and imaginary components, they actually exist on the other side in that absolute world that we were talking about. And it's divided from our world, but through the quantum veil. We can't see on either side of this quantum veil what's going on in there. But we know now that these real and imaginary components exist inside the quantum world. And they're discrete over there. They're not combined together, but somehow intention is able to reach across that veil and gather these real and imaginary components and arrange them and put them together. And when they put them together, they show up over here as sine waves or cosine waves. So you've heard a lot's going on right now in the physics world about string theory and all that. Well, yeah, that's what happens. They show up over here, they're strings, but over here, They are these components of what we call automata that are combined together. And when intention reaches across there and brings them over to this side, it creates these sine waves and cosine waves that make up pretty much everything that we know. This is another way of looking at the real and the imaginary. You can plot these things on a Cartesian graph to where this horizontal line becomes the real plane of time, kind of going along from the past into the future. And the Y plane shows the frequency domain. So this basically shows how frequency and time come together as it travels through space. But now almost everybody has heard that everything is a vibration of frequency. However, I would like to change that to everything is a wave function that has different properties. Waves consist of more than just frequency. Waves have frequency, which is the carrier wave from transmitter to receiver. So if you're talking to somebody, you have to be on the same wavelength as them as they are so that you can receive whatever they're transmitting. But the frequency is just that carrier wave. However, the phase of that frequency is what's holding the information and creates the shape and the form and the geometry of it. And the amplitude of it, or the magnitude of it, carries the emotion. Now, the other thing that this illustration here shows is that the height of the wave is the magnitude or the amplitude of it. And the distance between two peaks or two valleys would become the wavelength of it. But this again just points out that waves have more than just frequency. They have frequency, they have amplitude, and they have this phase. So this is the part that you really never see. This took me a long time to figure this out because they always show it to us like this. And they show that the cosine is 90 degrees out of phase with the sine wave. However, when you really look closely at it, you'll see it looks more like this, to where this is the sine wave that's going up and down on the y plane. And this is the horizontal plane that represents time as it moves along. But that cosine wave is running not only 90 degrees out of phase time-wise, but it's running 90 degrees out of phase spatial-wise. So as this was going up and down on one plane, the cosine is going away from and back towards you. And you back off and you look at it, it looks like that. So I want to make a couple of just notes about amplitude, which is the other thing that waves are made, or waves contain, is they contain this volume or this amplitude or magnitude. And there's a difference between amplitude and magnitude because amplitude has a sign on it. It's like a plus sign or a minus sign, whereas magnitude is the same thing as the amplitude, but it doesn't have the sign on it. And together, the magnitudes of these particles connect over time to create what's called an amplitude envelope. Now, there's a guy that really studied this named Manfred Clynes, and he made this little device called a scintigraph that was like a touchpad that you put your finger on, and he would measure how hard your finger is pressing against that touchpad and whether or not it's pulling towards you or going away from you. And he was able to discover that each one of the frequencies or each one of the emotions, if you ask a person, you get a person into one of these emotions, that these wave shapes change. And what's amazing about it is the same for everybody, and it's also cross-special to where even animals have this same kind of reaction to it. And the interesting thing is that animals speak in this domain. They don't speak in the frequency domain. So I can say to my dog, um, I can be really nice about it, say, "Come over here, buddy, and let me beat the crap out of you." He'll run right over. But if I say, um, "Get over here and let me give you a big hug," he's going to run the other way because they listen in these time domain signals. They're not listening in the frequency domain. They're listening in the time domain. and the amplitude of it is carrying the emotion of it. And this is why music is so powerful, because it's full of all of these amplitude rises and falls that have these different kind of feelings to them and relate to different emotions. So here again, we can kind of go back and we can see how those three things, the frequency, the phase, and the amplitude, is what really creates a sound vibration. It's not just frequency. So now, what is reality made of? Well, it kind of starts off right here with what the scientists call a singularity, which is basically the creator of physical reality. So reality begins with the desire and the will and the intention and the volition of the first cause of all reality, which in a universal terms would be the I am. This really could be your own self. You could be um, your will and your desire and your intention can be the first cause of the reality in your life. This could be the creator reality itself or represent us as the creator. Now, for a minute, I want to talk a little bit about mental energy. We've already talked about physical energy as being one of the triune forms of reality. Remember, we said that reality has these three forms of energy: spiritual, mental, and physical. And we've just finished talking about physical reality and how all that gets projected and created. But now I want to talk a minute about mental reality. The mental energy has these seven adjunct levels of mind. Human beings can get through the first five of these, or animals can get through the first five of these, but they can't really reach the sixth and seventh level. And this shows actually how the the subconscious mind and the superconscious mind are extensions of the conscious mind. And what gets us there? We spend most of our time in the subconscious mind because of the lower emotions like hate and discomfort and that sort of thing. But if we speed ourselves up, we can get into the higher emotions with love and peace and inspiration. We can get into this superconscious mind. And that will lead us back into what is spiritual reality and what is God and why do people believe in God? Well, these are just all notes that I made about why I believe in God and that reality is like inevitable and that uh, there's a number of other reasons that I won't get into right now about how that works. But I do want to point out that spiritual experience is, there's a physiology of it, how that actually works. It's a glandular thing that kind of looks like this, to where you have this third ventricle. The ancients called it the cave of Brahma, with the pineal at one end and the pituitary gland at the other end. And your true self is coming in to the pineal gland here, that's trying to get across this cave over to the pituitary gland, because this controls all of our behavior. But it can never really get across there because this little cave, the ceiling of it is the thalamus that's hooked up to all the external sensory mechanisms, and the thalamus, which is hooked up to all of the internal sensory mechanisms. So this experience that we have externally and internally actually filters this as it comes across, and we're hardly ever become our true self because of those filters. It boils down to, no matter which way you go, parasympathetic or sympathetic, you have to make a choice where it's a threat or a challenge. If you choose challenge, you go into peak experience and sensory resonance. Whereas if you choose threat, you go into these dissonances like sympathetic and parasympathetic dissonance that eventually wind up in death. Whereas if you choose chalice, everything, you go into sensory resonance and life. This basically just shows all the different technologies that I've created to help a person move through all of that. And one of the main things is vibrotactile vibration, how that's the best way to get information into the body. There's a difference between oscillation and vibration, whereas oscillation is laying on something that's vibrating that moves the whole body, whereas vibration is something that happens inside of the body. So my vibrasound wavetable is a hydrosonic fluid transducer that causes vibrations inside of the body instead of oscillating the whole body. This was the first one that I built. This is the most modern version of the wavetable. We also have that available as a massage table and a zero gravity chair. This is the Sensorium, which is a multi-sensory interface that can generate, program, and synchronize any known vibrational phenomenon. So you can go in here and create all kind of programs based on frequency and allow a person to see it and hear it and feel it, even do color therapy with it as well. And what I mentioned before is that organisms are musicians, not just machines. And the best way, the preferred way of analyzing the status of a hurt person is through voice analysis. Over the years, we've made all kind of biometric devices, EEGs, quantum EEGs, um, skin resistance technologies, all that to discover who a person is and what they want. But the best way to do that is through their voice. And these slides that I'm showing you now just show all the different things that are in a person's voice and how we've created a new device called a fundamentalizer that basically shows everything there is to know about this person's voice. It's a histogram of all the notes in their voice. It draws it on a piano screen, runs that out 40 octaves and assigns a correlated color to it. You can see the waveform here. It shows you which note that you're closest to and how far away from it that you are. Then it puts the fundamental frequency up here along with the phases and the amplitudes of all of the first 11 overtones of that. So playing this back to a person is actually using their own voice as a feedback instead of a sine wave generator. And it takes this up 40 octaves and shows it as a color. And this color can actually go to the screen, or it can go to a projector that is projected right onto the person's body or onto the ceiling or a wall. This is our latest showroom and therapy center that we've put in Santa Monica, California. That is, as I said, a showroom and a therapy center for all of our technologies. We've got several of these out now in Miami and Japan and Dubai and several other places. With our hope is that we can continue that more and more. I believe if we had one of these in every major city in about 5 years of time, we could significantly change the world. So, in conclusion, I just want to say that all of our technologies are based on resolving the challenge to transformation and transcendence of the human condition. And it can be experienced at various locations around the world. And it's all for sale at the Globe Sound Healing Center in San Francisco. Any questions that you have about my presentation can be emailed to me from the information that's on the last slide of this presentation. And please check out our website that's also on that last slide and let us know what you think about that. You can actually even join a concordance that we're putting together that works as a forum for all of our clients to talk to each other and gives them special discounts to all of our technology and our workshops. So thank you so very much for joining me in this investigation and into the nature of reality. I know I had to rush through it, but hopefully you got some of it. I'm sending blessings to all of you now and holding the space that each of you decide to master yourself by opening yourself up to transformation and unbroken communion with Source. So I thank you again. And these are my contact information. If you want to, I pay a lot of attention to emails. So if you have any questions, you can email me and I will get back to you as quickly as possible.
So the interesting thing is when you talk about imaginary, I was really into the teachings of Don Juan. I actually had a course in college on the teachings of Don Juan,
Yeah.
and he talked about the Wadnado,
Yeah,
which is the other side where all potential and everything is.
that's right.
It's basically the same you're talking about as far as
Yeah,
imaginary.
that is the singularity, represents the potential. All the potential in reality is in that singularity to
When
it.
you say that comes from are you saying that all of reality comes from the black hole in our galaxy?
That's correct.
But what about all the other black
Well,
holes in all the other galaxies? There's
they have,
millions of them.
yeah, they have their own set of rules because there are beings that go out there and create those. Those are like space within space. So you can see the whole thing as all those galaxies together, or you can see that each one of those galaxies has their own set of rules.
Okay.
And
So it's like the central sun for our being.
yes, right.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. And so really the whole deal is like, how do we get there to access this, right? And
That's
I've
it.
got, the way we talk about it here is when you tune into first of all, when you are in oneness and unity consciousness, you're in a brainwave state, mostly of theta, but it's actually a combination. So the main thing that gets you into theta is tuning into multiple things at once.
Yeah, you actually have to expand out of the theta instead of being in a focused theta state. You have to get out of that to where you're reaching all the way up to the pineal gland, to where all the information is coming in, and then
Yeah.
going all the way through all the chakras to the bottom chakra, but it's centered there on the theta waves.
So there's so many different things. I mean, people do ayahuasca. I mean, sit with people that are one with the universe and hopefully absorb it. There's nature that does it. Just being still.
Yeah, there's all kind of ways to get into that. Um, but what I discovered is that and this was from a lot of research in the psychedelics back in the 60s when I was a chemistry major in college. And I discovered that the only connection that consciousness has to reality are these um, sensory mechanisms that we have. And that if you synchronize those sensory mechanisms, you can achieve one of those altered states. So you don't really need to pop the pill so much as you need to expand yourself into all of those realities at the same time. And I was very fortunate when I moved to California that within a couple of weeks, I was at John Lilly's home. I met my wife there. And he had Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and Oz Janiger and Robert Anton Wilson, all those people. That was their hangout. So I spent a lot of time with them showing them this, and they basically validated this research and saying this is what they were trying to do with the psychedelics. So now people are really calling my technology digital psychedelics so that you can enter those states without having to pop the pill.
Yeah. So, I know Manfred Klein's, he's actually been here and taught classes here. And the main thing about what he's teaching is called envelope, which is simply the change in volume over time. And the number one thing he's looking at to really clarify it is how fast something gets loud. Anger gets loud quick, whereas love gets loud soft, slowly.
Right.
That's the number one thing. It has nothing to do with carrier phase, what he's talking about. He's actually just talking about the change in volume over time.
Yeah, but his little machine that he built basically shows you the waveform of that. It's the amplitude, like you said, it's the height of it, the amplitude of it
Over
over
time.
time. Right.
Yeah,
And
cool.
so reverence, like you said, is a very smooth thing, whereas anger is something that happens very quickly and goes away.
Yeah. So, as far as the caves of Brahma, so about 7 years ago, I had this psychic. He said, the Hathors are here and they want to create a super highway between your pituitary and pineal gland. And I said, okay. And they've been working to actually activate the caves of Brahma, which is exactly that. And it's a whole channel to actually be able to access. I think that's where we should really be spending because a lot of people talk about the actual pituitary and what frequency it does that, or the pineal or the hypothalamus, but it's a whole contraption, right?
Right. Yeah, that's that thing that slide that I showed you to where all of that has to take place, but what blocks it is the sensory mechanisms. Your internal experience and your external experience act as filters right there in that cave of Brahma.
Uh-huh.
And the thalamus have these little cilia that stick into that cave. And if you put a microscope in there and you look at what's going on, you can see that information going back and forth between the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. It looks like wind going across a wheat field, back and forth and back and forth. And the pineal is trying to get across to the pituitary gland because it controls everybody's behavior. And I would go as far as to say is that what's actually entering into the pineal gland is a person's true self. But it can never really get across that cave and behave like that because it gets blocked by all of the sensory mechanisms.
Yeah, and
So
your belief systems.
that's right.
Right.
And
Yeah, Alice Bailey says that, that whole contraption is the main connection to the soul, which is
yeah,
connected to all of source, really.
right. Yep.
Which, yeah. So there's one thing I want to share with you and see what you think, because this is I've got a little bit different view of frequency that I've been using for quite a while, and as the way I see the whole universe, and it's really probably I mean, there's different ways you can always look at anything, but just see what you think about this. So I see there's frequencies, and then there's a bunch of frequencies, which is a timbre, right? A harmonic structure. And
Yep.
then there's the relationship of all the frequencies and the relationship of all the timbres, which is a musical interval, right?
That's right. Yep.
But then fourth is you add time, and now you have music, and that's flow. That's like musical flow. So it's really when you look at a frequency chart, I'm always like, well, where's the music? The music is the whole deal. The quality of flow through each of your 11 systems, the quality of flow through your quantum body, the quality of flow from source through back to you. That quality of flow is either flowing or not flowing. And that's the big deal. But that flow is made up of notes and timbres and musical intervals.
Yeah, well, that's what's confusing to people because when they look at this drawn on a scale, they usually only just see one frequency, that sine wave or that cosine wave, whereas the music is basically a whole bunch of those frequencies at the same time. And that creates that complex wave that we were talking about instead of a simple wave. And basically, what that boils down to is that this idea that things are single frequencies, like you see all these charts out there, an organ is this or a disease is that frequency. That's inaccurate because everything we know is a complex wave. It's not just a simple wave like that.
Yeah. The way I think of it also is the way quantum physics looks at it as the difference between particles or waves. And in quantum physics, if you look for particles, that's what you see, and you can measure them. If you look for waves, that's what you see, and you can measure it. So it's like this weird thing based on what you're actually doing. So I think of the actual particles as the frequencies in a way that can be a combination of frequencies, but really the music is the wave. That's changing over time. And when you get into the quantum world, what's really interesting is there's no time. So now you're in the moment of the actual song.
Right. That's why when we do all of our technology, when we feed information back to a person, like they're speaking into a microphone, and we're capturing all the frequencies there. When we feed that back to them, we feed them all of those frequencies at the same time. So it's not their voice that's spread out over time. It's all those frequencies that they just mentioned that are all playing back at the same time.
What if they're a mess?
Well, if they sit there and they talk about if they sit there and they talk about being a mess, they'll become more. But we never allow a person to talk about um,
Oh, okay. So you make
anything,
sure they talk about something beautiful or good.
about something that inspires them or whatever. Because the
Cool.
truth is that if you get sick and you go to the doctor and you start telling them what's wrong, it just amplifies it. So we've changed that all around. We're not really into healing at all now. We're into this thing of enhancing what's right instead of fixing what's wrong.
Yeah, I learned that from you a long time ago. I've been using that one for a long time. Yeah. The most important part here, my main takeaway is the intention that you set is really the whole deal.
That's right. Yeah, that's actually what tells the singularity what to project out. So that's it's the intention that combines those real and imaginary components and turns them into sine waves and cosine waves. And that's what our what I call the quantum perceptual horizon experiences.
Oh my God. So you're going to like this. This is really funny because, the whole deal, especially if you got any negative beliefs about yourself, it's a big freaking deal.
Big deal, big deal.
You can't do it anymore. But then the problem is you go, oh, I suck. And then I suck because I think I suck.
Well, when people come in to see us, a lady comes in and says, "Well, my doctor's told me to come see you because I've got a tumor and they can't get rid of it, and they can't help me, and so they told me to come to see you." And so they come see me and they say, "Can you help me get rid of this tumor?" And I say, "Well, let's don't talk about the tumor because that's the actual part of your problem. What is the potential part of your problem?" And
Nice.
they'll usually say to me, "No, I don't know what you're talking about," because we are so focused on the actual reality. We're not focused on the
Right,
potential.
right. We just have to be so present in the moment and be aware. It's really a altered state to be aware of your beliefs and your thoughts and monitor them and be able to transform them in the moment. It's unbelievable. It
Well,
takes peace.
the important thing to remember there is that thinking is purely imaginary. You can think whatever you want, and it doesn't really do a lot of damage, except maybe a little internal turmoil. But when you speak it, when you express that
Mm,
thought, you
mm,
bring that into the real planes.
mm.
So thinking is imaginary, but when you speak it, even just rolling your eyes or making a gesture or whatever like that, brings that into the real plane, and it actually starts making those sine waves and cosine waves come together. So if you just say it once, in passing or something, it's okay. But if it's a mantra of something that you say over and over and over again, it will actually bring those cosine and sine waves together and it will create your own reality.
That's interesting because it makes me think of like if I want to remember something, I say it out loud.
That's right. And
Right.
and you know what? If you the brain is like that, the more inputs it has, the better it is. So if I can look at a person's name and I see it, I can say it out loud and I hear it. I can write it down. And every sensory that you use uh, actually increases the ability to remember it.
Cool. I always say the basis of all peace is stable, consistent vibrations as opposed to chaos.
Yes, it's that's an interesting thing though, because the chaos only shows up when you're not taking care of everything. That
Cool.
you're kind of going along in time, and then an event happens, and that event you either perceive that as positive or negative. And so if you're taking care of everything, it's built into the machine that the machine requires being taken care of. So if you're not taking care of it, it'll start giving you warnings that something's not right. If you
Hmm.
fix it, then everything goes away. But if you don't, the machine itself will just shut itself down. And that's where disease and illness and all that really comes from.
So it's not just a quantum world of us believing everything's perfect and it's all taken care of. We actually have to take care of reality and make sure it doesn't get us in the butt.
Yeah, because we're the person that controls that singularity. Remember, I said that you could look at that from the standpoint that the universe is doing it, but we're also space inside of space. So we have we're doing our own creation and our own perception of it all.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's not boring. What a trip. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I think vibration besides spiritual evolution, I think studying vibration is the most important thing a human being can do.
Yeah, yeah. We're incorporating it into the schools now.
That's great.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Blessings. Thanks
Bye.
for inviting me.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Darren Austin Hall. Hi, Darren.
Hey, David.
Welcome,
Pleasure to be
welcome.
here. Thank you. Thank you.
Darren is a spiritual wisdom teacher, sound channeler, mystical musician, author, poet, and ecstatic dance DJ facilitator. He's the creator of the Source Resonance Academy, devoted to leading sound healing training retreats, intensives, and workshops around the world to initiate others onto the path of using sacred sound as a medicine of the soul.
Mm,
Welcome, welcome.
thank you, David.
What have you been up to lately?
Well, I mean, the big thing is I just launched a course with the Shift Network called Gaia Sound Healing, which has been really exciting. It's integrating two of my big loves, which is sound healing, and then I've been studying the Gnostic mysteries of the ancient goddess of Earth for well over a decade as I've been kind of reclaiming my European ancestry. And the course is like a 7 week deep dive into those weavings. So that's been the
Uh,
main thing I've been up to. And I just got back from the Envision Festival in Costa Rica, where I live right now. I'm originally from Canada, where I got to share my Guy Awakening concerts. So yeah, and just trying to stay cool. It's super hot here in March.
Excellent. Okay, I got the big question for you. If you had all the money on in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
Yeah, for me, one of my great loves that I'd love to accomplish in my life is I'd love to build a mystery school, like a true spiritual university as they had in antiquity, with lots of temple classrooms and lots of grounds for gardens and connecting to the earth, and just start running like really beautiful curriculum to really help align and heal people's consciousness. Because I think, especially this year with everything that's happening in the world, we're becoming more and more aware that the main problem is people's consciousness is very wounded and fragmented. And in the ancient world, they had these spiritual universities devoted to really holistic education. So I'd love to build one or even a network in many different places, that could be connected with the different stylings of different geography. Because there's just so many sacred sites, of course, all over the world too, which are being reactivated.
I love it. We're the only real college of sound healing in the whole United States right now. And
Mm.
and we're also creating a curriculum for kids around the world.
Oh,
And we've
beautiful.
got a huge grant to do it. We've already created 2,500 exercises for kids from 3 months all the way up to 18 years.
Whoa, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Oh my God. Excellent. Okay. Well, that's really cool. Let's tell me about yourself. How did you get into sound healing?
Yeah, so it's quite an odyssey, when I was a child, like I think most musicians and sound healers, I always had this immersive world of sound and music. Like I was always hearing sound and music, and it was just a part of my world, and when I would go to sleep at night, this music that I was always sort of hearing on the inner plane would just be that much more loud, and I would sing myself to sleep, often banging my head against the pillow as a drum, as a makeshift drum to keep a rhythm. And I would go into visionary states of consciousness. I remember feeling like I was up in the clouds singing. I'd see these angelic beings. And I did that from as young as I can remember till I was, a young teenager. And sometimes an hour or two a night. And sometimes I would do it when I'd wake up in the morning as well. And I had no reference for what I was doing. My parents luckily tolerated it. I think they just thought it was some weird thing that their son is doing. But for me, it was just something that brought me great joy. And then when I became a teenager and I became sort of self-conscious, I started to think, wow, this behavior is a little strange. Maybe I should stop it at some point. And around that time, my parents had put me into like piano lessons and such because they could see I had a musical proclivity. But I never liked learning music in that kind of technical Western mind, where they would just, I remember being in these piano lessons with this woman where she just play a piece and then I would parrot it back to her. And it just seemed kind of boring to me. I just wanted to be at home with our piano and just go on these little Brian Eno sketches when my foot was long enough to hit the reverb pedal. And that was my greatest bliss, was just channeling sound. But I didn't call it that at the time. I just thought it was music making. And so I actually started to incur this story that I was a poor musician because I didn't have the discipline to learn technique very well. And then it wasn't until, my 20s where I was studying Chinese medicine in Toronto. And I actually went to see an astrologer for the first time in my life when I was about 28. So I was entering astrologically into like the rings of my Saturn return. And I wasn't sure about Chinese medicine school. I was a year in, I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel if it was my path. And this astrologer just said to me, "Well, you're a spiritual teacher and a sound healer." And spirituality is the love of my life. I was just lit up by that. Like I'd love to teach people about this stuff. It's so interesting to me and practical. And then sound healing, though, I'd never heard like that phrase, like sound and healing put together. And I just asked her, I've never heard about that. What is that? And she said, just Google it. And I went home and that Google search was literally like turning the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars into warp drive. Like it was just like all the stars streaming. And I stayed up till dawn, literally like studying all this stuff. And I was so inspired and excited by it. And then, as so happens, when you start to really follow your path of destiny, the universe starts to put synchronicities in your path. And a few days later, I was invited to a winter solstice concert. And it just so happened to be this man who was playing gongs and crystal bowls. And I just had such a resonance with that music. I'd never heard music before that wasn't for entertainment, that was for entrainment. And I was literally weeping, weeping with resonance. And I just knew I had to do that. Like that, I was so called, especially the tones of the crystal bowls. And the final piece was once I got the crystal bowls a year later, was I was doing an extra training at this school that was actually Chinese medicine, but also multidisciplinary in shaking medicine and creative transformation therapy with this incredible man called Dr. Bradford Keeney, who had lived in the Kalahari Desert and interacted with the San Bush people, these like hunter-gatherer people who had maintained all this incredible indigenous wisdom. And they shake their bodies in these healing ceremonies and literally like activate Kundalini, activate a clearing of their energy blockages for freeing their voice. But they call their shamans who initiate these ceremonies, who sing the songs and their drums that then everyone dances to, song catchers. And he described that these songcatcher shamans describe using the drum, altering their consciousness, and they perceive then a world of song lines, of these lines of light everywhere, what they call ropes to God. And these are seen as like the spiritual telecommunications network where there's all these songs zimming around from all these different beings and deities. And the shaman will like catch one of these ropes and receive a song. And when I heard that, I just shot up my hand and rather kind of bashfully said what I was doing as a child, and Bradford just pointed at me and he said in his southern drawl, "We've got a live one here." And I just remember being like, "Oh my God, wait a second. All that weird stuff I was doing as a kid, maybe that was like a part of a gift or a medicine." I remember racing home. I had the crystal bowls. I started playing them again and just opening my voice in that manner of just singing vocables and tones. And it was like it was still there. I just had this ability to catch all these harmonies and melodies. And that was just the beginning. And then from there it just lifted off. I mean, I was on the crest of sound healing before it really exploded to what it is nowadays. So in Toronto, I became sort of this unicorn of like, oh, the guy playing the crystal bowls, and I had a lot of great success, and it turned into like I worked with producers. I loved recording albums. I have a whole bunch of albums that I put out now of sound healing and what I call shamanic pop music. And it just continues to rise. I've been touring the world now doing concerts and stuff, and I got to play at TEDx, and it's just amazing to see like you starting this college, like all these sound healers now. It's like it feels like we're now on the precipice of becoming like a very like solid form of medicine, which is so needed, right? In this energetic age as people become aware of their vibrational intelligence.
So you're accessing higher realms, right? And
Yeah.
it sounds like you're kind of doing it from the beginning, but I assume you've actually figured out how to even access it at will even better.
Yeah, definitely. There's been like evolutionary massaging of it, but I mean, it really comes down to like it's just been this progressive opening, 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 opening. And when I have a sound healing training called Source Resonance, and we do the shaking medicine in that because the shaking medicine sessions were actually foundational in helping me getting out of the way, right? Because when we channel, especially if we're singing, which can be such a like vulnerable expression of the soul, singing in an improvised channeled way where we're like, I don't know what note's going to come next. Of course, the ego has been conditioned in Western culture to like fear and be like insecure and be like, oh, you better have a structure and a plan. And it's just been this progressive opening of more and more trusting, trusting, trusting to the point now where I can be anywhere and just instrument or not, just start to sing and go into that space. And yeah, it is like, those higher worlds, like I'm finding out more and more ways to connect deeper, to be in a deeper devotion to it. And it's one of the most extraordinary things because when you're doing a sound healing journey, I find your own consciousness is starting to get into those theta brainwave states, right? Where you start to get insights and visions. So I'll be like channeling, singing, aware of the room, but then I'm also getting like visions inside my mind. And it's like this multi-dimensional consciousness of just being fully surrendered to the moment. And it's a spiritual practice as well. And that's what's so blissful about it. I always tell people at the end of the journey, they're always like, "Oh, thank you so much for the journey." I'm like, "Thank you. I was with you on the journey. I just created the vessel and then I was kind of captaining it here and there, but I went somewhere too. And that's so profound.
Do you have a technique, or is it just you just tap in and opens up?
So for me, it has been more of a tapping in, but I've noticed a few things that I like to teach people. One is when I set up my like setup, the bowls. I mean, now I work with Ableton on my computer as well, but it's a mixture of Ableton, digital soundscapes, and instruments. But before I lay out anything, I lay out like I have a prayer mat that was given to me by a Native American friend. I have like a bag that I take with what I call my sacred objects. And I set out the prayer mat and I always do like a prayer to first of all honor the space that I'm in. Where am I? Is it a different land? I want to make sure that the spirits give me permission, that I'm there, that I'm coming in respect to do medicine work there. And then I have all kinds of little objects, and each object is a little prayer in itself. I have like a stone from the Castle Montségur in south of France that connects to the Cathars, which I believe I was a part of in a past life. I have another stone gifted me from a friend from Cornwall that was where Merlin was apparently born, and I have a deep connection to the Druids. I have my father's rosary, and so on. And once I've set all those objects up in prayer, my consciousness is already in quite like a devotional kind of sacred alignment. And then I'll say a last sort of prayer to the divine itself to say, I'm presenting myself as an instrument to be used as you see fit. May there be good and blessed vibrations coming through. It's sometimes different, the prayer. And then I call on these guys, which are the white lions, who are my spirit animals, as protectors, for not only me, but for the whole space. It's always nice to have a bit of that spiritual hygiene. And then, after that, it's like I am really in this like state of reverence that allows things to flow a lot more. And then right at the end, when I finish the journey, the first thing I do is I put my hand on my prayer mat and I give thanks just to close the ceremony, but also for me to give back, to not own what's come through. Because, I learned early on in my journey, there was moments when I was younger and in my ego, and you'd finish and you'd get all this applause and there'd be people like, oh, look at this amazing person. And I'd notice there'd be moments when the ego would take that in and you'd get this like, oh, inflated thing. But I noticed quite quickly that if I brought any of that, look at me energy into the sound journey, the channel would close. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, that's not good. So I really learned that it has to be a prayer, before and after the whole thing has to be in service of something higher than myself. And whatever accolades and rewards come, I mean, that's bonus, but I don't care if I'm doing a sound journey for 5 people or 500. I always come with that energy.
It's nice, because I've really gotten into, and I've been teaching this for so many years, there's to be able to be 100% in the zone, in the state of reverence, you say,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes.
it's hard for people. A lot of people, some people can go into trance and just do it for hours, right? Like,
Right.
but it's like I often kind of get a little distracted. So I actually, this is what I do is I always start with we set sacred space now, and then we
Mhm.
ask for help from all of our guides,
Love that.
ascended masters, archangels, ancestors, and positive aliens.
Nice.
Only for our highest good, right?
Positive
Right,
aliens.
the positive ones, right? Only for our highest good. And it's funny because I used to do that a long time ago just to be kind of cool and do it and see what happened. And then years ago, I was in the hospital and somebody did a treatment on me, and she called in these higher beings, and the whole room on the phone turned into white light for 4 hours.
Whoa.
And she had called in Baba G and Christ and Gabriel. And when I got home, I thought, wonder if I could do that. And I went Baba G,
Mm.
Christ, and when I said Gabriel, I went into a cocoon of white light. So now the Hathors have showed up.
Whoa.
They said they wanted to create a super highway between my pituitary and pineal gland. And
Wow.
I'm like, okay, cool. So now it's like when I say it, it happens. You know, it's so funny. I woke up this morning with this thought in my mind. I want to share with you. It's tied to this
Mm.
perfectly. Um, the most amazing thing in the world about this human body is that we can do this. We can move and do everything, stand up, walk, talk with no thought. We don't
Mm.
go, oh, I would like to do this. We just do it. And the body goes, okay, ding, right? There's no message between it.
There's no lag.
Right. Which is when we go, I intend this, that's like a message between. There
Mm.
is a lag, right?
Mm. Mm.
Versus what you just said, where I just do it.
Yeah.
Someone said, when you say it, it is done.
Mm. Mhm. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
And
you
then
just
you're,
put in this. I mean, it feels like a mystical instinct almost. And I don't know if that's, because I've had experiences in past lives doing this where it just happens. I mean, I've definitely had visions of that. But I do think on a collective level, as we're going into this Aquarian age, these types of, especially channeling, I mean, Uranus is supposed to go into Gemini. I mean, that's going to be like a collective teaching and channeling for all humans and a restoration of gnosis, which I think is so needed on the planet because we've been living under systems of authoritarian religiosity where it's like only the priestly class has the ability to do, like you're saying, like evoke Archangel Gabriel, we'd get in trouble, if we stood up in church and went like, I just had a visitation by Gabriel, and he told me all these things. The priest would be like, shh, you shouldn't say that. That's blasphemy. Only I can do that. But now we're actually in this age where we're remembering that this is our birthright. We all have access to this, which is really amazing. It's going to be incredible to see where this goes. I think it'll also be, of course, very weird. There's going to be weird stuff that happens because, we've also been so distorted for so long. There's so much woundedness, and like, and we have to be careful as well. We have to be responsible because, when we open up to those realms, there, as you said, the positive aliens. Some people may be like just calling on the aliens and then not realizing, we're gonna have to get very aware of the spiritual hierarchies, so that when a being comes through, we'll be like, oh, right away, actually, no, you're not invited.
right, right.
Be really interesting.
I had one of my students actually got caught up in that realm where the beings told her that she was hurting people. And she was in,
Oh,
it was really, oh my God, she was in the hospital. And the doctor called me up and she said, I hear you're working with her. What are you doing? And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, oh, I'm telling her to get rid of those suckers. Just use your power and say, no, go and call in the light. And the doctor says, that's exactly what I'm doing.
wow.
I'm like, whoa.
Oh, that's very cool.
Right.
There we go. More of that, please.
Right. So it's really incredible to start working in these realms like we've known because we were born from this realm. In
Right.
fact, until you're one, you're still really connected. People say, "Oh, this is weird," but we were there.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've been studying a lot of Rudolf Steiner stuff lately, and in the Waldorf schools, they really approach the education of children from that like we're actually coming out of that spiritual world. And the danger is as you become more and more of an adult, you're becoming more distant from that world if you don't maintain the awareness and the connection. And there's this huge opportunity that could be happening when we are in our childhoods, where if we stay connected to that, all the information that maybe we're bringing in can be more highlighted, which I find really wonderful.
It's
And I love that
interesting.
you're working with sound healing in children because, I mean, to me, the medicine of sound healing is spiritual medicine, right? It's like you look at the vibrational cosmology of pretty much every ancient culture. They all say sound was the creative force, and the soul is vibrational. It's more ethereal than the body, obviously, and that's why Pythagoras said, when you make sound, you're adjusting the soul. Like you are literally just by using the voice, by singing, especially when it's done in channeling and it's not like some lyrical pop song or something. You're creating a connection with the sacred with immediacy. And that's what I think is so potent about sound healing, is that it evokes it in lay people. People come to sound journeys who maybe never would have had a mystical state before, and maybe come in skeptical. I've had, I'm sure you have as well. I've had people come in, and it's usually like older guys who are brought in by their very open woman wife who's like, divine feminine's rising. A lot more women are interested in this stuff. And he'll be coming in kind of grumbly, like, oh, I'm at this weird sound healing thing. And at the end, I'll bring them up, and this guy will just like come out, and his eyes will be like, and I remember this one guy coming up to me afterwards, and he was just like, "Oh my God, like never had this before, but like the spirit of my like widowed, like my ex-wife who died, like she came to me and she spoke to me, like what is this?" And I had to really talk him through like his first metaphysical experience. But he came in like, begrudging, and so I always tell my students too, like this is like really powerful medicine. Like I always love to be playful. I think a sense of humor is the closest sense to God. But I also feel like we should also be responsible and take it seriously that when you do a sound journey, a sound bath, you're connecting people to source. And that's why afterwards, it's nice to hold space for people, not rush out there, oh, I gotta leave. And because there might be people coming up to who are a bit, vulnerable.
So tell me more about the Gnostics.
Yeah, so I've been on this journey for gosh, about 15 years now. As I stated earlier, I'm from Canada, and we have indigenous people there as well. You guys in America call them Native Americans. They actually prefer to be called First Nations in Canada, or rather Turtle Island, what their name for North America, right? And I was just very blessed around that time that I found sound healing in my late 20s. I found these, indigenous elders in Canada who were teaching these kind of open format spiritual courses on their land, for anyone who was interested. And I worked with them for a few years, and it was very profound. Like it just taught me a lot about the sacredness of earth, about animism, but near the end of my time working with them, they had given us this teaching that everyone has indigenous heritage. And she even, the elder was a woman, she even like looked around this sacred fire circle and she pointed at all the white people and she's like, even you white people, you have indigenous heritage. Which I was kind of aghast because in all, I had all this privileged education, I got to university, whatever, but I'd never been taught about indigenous Europeans. That was just not in my worldview. So of course I was super curious, and I asked her afterwards, who are these indigenous white people you speak of? And she just kind of laughed at me in that beautiful way that elders do, and she said, "Well, we don't know. We just know they exist. It's for you to find out." So I just started going on this mission, and I found like the ancient Celtic cultures. I have a tattoo on my arm. This is the Awen. This is like a druid tattoo. I started to find out about the druids. And then at a certain point, I started studying these ancient texts called the Nag Hammadi Library that were found in 1945 in that region, Nag Hammadi of Egypt, through the lens of this one writer and amazing teacher, John Lam Lash. And these texts were mystery school texts that were actually hidden from view because, around 300, 400 AD in the Roman Christian Empire, they just started destroying all the temples because it became a colonial religion, and anything that wasn't Christian was seen as the enemy of the state. So the mystery schools were raised, all the libraries, the Library of Alexandria was burned down, the biggest library we've ever had in our modern era, or in this era of the last few millennia. And so a lot of this information had to go underground until Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi Library were discovered. And these texts are very counter to a lot of the, I'll say, patriarchal religious teachings, the Abrahamic faith, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, that have beautiful seeds of mysticism. But of course, they all became very institutionalized and eventually, became coupled with nation states and religious empires. But these texts talk about a different kind of spirituality. And they talk about these mystery schools in the ancient world, which were known as the spiritual universities of antiquity, and how they were more about developing in every human being self-directed connection with the divine. It wasn't about having this hierarchical structure of the papacy where you have the pope, the bishops, the priests, and such who hold a kind of authoritarian view of religion, and then they sort of submit the masses to their wisdom. No, in these ancient worlds, or these ancient sacred cultures, human beings were initiated, and there were initiation ceremonies, where you would even drink psychedelic brews. They called them the kykeon in the Greek mystery schools. And you would have experiences of the living light of the divine, which was seen as the light body of Mother Earth. And you would have an interactive experience. You have a conversation with the divine. And you would learn that each and every one of us, through the heart especially, has this oracular connection to the divine, that we're guided at any time that we need it, and that we can self-govern ourselves. We can be self-directed. We don't need to rely on these outside authorities. And of course, that became a threat to an authoritarian system that was being built on a dominator hierarchy system, where it's like only we have the truth, we are the elites. A lot of the problems we see in this world right now, we have these elites who are running the world with all this secret occult knowledge. We've been starved from all that knowledge for thousands of years because they've submitted us into the system. So, long answer, a Gnostic is really just someone who's reclaimed their ability to know as the divine knows, to be a receiver for divine intelligence, to be a channel for it. And I do believe we're in a renaissance or a reflowering of that, where more and more people are realizing that. And that's why people are leaving the organized religions and starting to go their own way and find different kinds of communities where men and especially women who have been disempowered through those religions are finding their own connection to the divine, and then piecing and sharing together truth and community, because it is also about being in community.
What would you say to someone the easiest way to teach them how to connect to source? Because I've been asking people for 20 years now. Most people don't even know what unity consciousness and oneness is.
Hmm.
They have no idea.
Right.
So, it's like I can, just tap into it. And I'm there, right? Right,
Yeah, yeah, for
right.
sure. Because
But
you build
it's
a
like
relationship.
talking to aliens. How do you explain how to connect to source to an alien that
Yeah.
has no idea?
Well, two main things come to me. The first thing I often tell people, and I work with people as well in coaching and mentoring, and if someone comes with a lot of emotional tumult, if they're going through a crisis moment, I'll give guidance, but then I always tell them, go to nature. If you're living in a city, just go to the park, find a tree or a nice piece of grass, sit, take some calming breaths, build yourself into kind of a meditative, contemplative, receptive awareness, and just sit and just allow, and just allow something to come forward. And why I tell them to go in nature is because, well, on a mystical level, nature is a more primal and visceral experience of Mother Earth, and all these indigenous teachings, going back to the ancient mystery schools who called Mother Earth Magna Mater, the great goddess, they all say that she is our true teacher of wisdom. Her ancient name in the Greek mystery schools was Sophia, and Sophia is the root of philosophy, lover of wisdom. And then, of course, you see it in Taoism too. I had to study a lot of Taoism in Chinese medicine school, and Taoism has this beautiful teaching called Wu Wei, where they say the best way to live is to do nothing and follow the way of nature that's flowing through the heart. The heart is seen as kind of this radio transmitter that receives this guidance. They called it actually the guiding realm, this realm of guidance that Mother Earth is perpetually spilling this wisdom through the heart. And when you go into nature, because nature is a more visceral experience of Mother Earth, I just find it's easier to slip into that state of being in that connection. And the other thing I share with people is sound. You know, the minute you start to make sound with your voice, you start to vibrate yourself. It clears away any energetic dross, any blockages. It opens you. Sound literally creates light. It creates a connection. And this is why a lot of the yogis, you know, Nada Yoga, the whole system of sound in the Vedic culture of ancient yoga, you know, they say that sound and for them, they work with mantra. They say sound and mantra is an accelerator towards enlightened consciousness because it opens up that more energetic, vibrational, mystical nature with immediacy. And so I tell people, you know, the best practice, go into nature, contemplate, and then maybe chant a bit. And then after the chanting, you're to reside in the stillness. You know, the Om symbol, you know, there's three levels to Om. There's the A, which is waking consciousness, the U, which is, you know, unconsciousness, dreaming. And then there's the which is deep sleep. But then the fourth state of Om is Turaya, which is like after the sound is ended, the Aum, you're to sit in the silence. And because the sounds have started to cultivate the Turaya, the pure awareness consciousness. And that's when the messages tend to come forth. But you know, it's hard for Westerners because in the patriarchal culture that we live in, we're so into the mind. I've got to figure it out. I've got to think about it. I've got to do something about it. And the Taoists are just like, well, why not do nothing? And that's hard for a Westerner, you know, but being in nature, doing sound, those kind of start to build that bridge to that more receptive consciousness.
I love that. You know, there's a couple of things I tell people. I mean, the most basic of all is just peace. Whatever you can do to get to a place of peace. You've got
Sure.
your thing. Take a bath, you know, go nature, whatever you do to get to a place of peace. Because the more you're in peace, the more things start to open up. But there's an interesting thing also in when you look at the brain, when you're one with the universe, you're in a state of theta, which is a brainwave rate of mostly of 3.5 to 7 cycles per second. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Mhm.
When
Mhm.
you tune in to multiple things at once, you go into theta almost immediately. So
Mhm.
that's like sparkles on the water. Whoa, right? Or a view. Whoa, or anything in nature. Nature is all about multiple things at once. I mean,
Right.
all the branches on a tree is like totally cosmic.
Yes.
Really? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, a field of grass, or all of the sounds in a mix of music, or
Mm.
all of the harmonics in a bowl, or especially a gong. Oh my God, the left brain can't handle it. Way too much information. So you go into the right brain where the whole brain starts working instead of that focus on one thing of I got to do this and fix this, right?
Right.
Multiple, and there's so many cool ways to do it. Multiple things at once. I even do, you know, what I do is if I've got a problem, I think, what are all my problems? Right? And but I think, well, wait a second. I can't leave out all the gratitude. And I tune into my gratitude list, which is massive. If people, everybody's got to have a gratitude list. There's so many
Love
things to be
that.
grateful for. And then you look at all of it, and it's like, ah,
Yes, yes, I love that. I love that. And I love that just it's like using the problem itself to disrupt it by thinking about all the problems and stretches out the mind. That's great. I love that. I'm gonna use that.
you know, tell me more about the soul. I, this is the way I think of the soul, and
Mm.
I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's been an ongoing progression from different traditions. I've been reading Alice Bailey for
Oh, wow, yeah.
for 15 years every single night. I,
Okay.
and there's really, it's interesting. There's different definitions of soul and higher self and spirit. This
Mm,
is the way a lot of people think of it. The higher self is that part of you that's connected to source, which is all knowing.
mm,
The soul is also connected to source, which is all knowing, but the soul carries all the information from past lives, but it's a frequency of you that is carried from lifetime to lifetime. Where spirit is that enlivening energy that gives us life, which is really the most unbelievable thing ever when you really sink into it. I mean, life. Where
yeah,
does that come from and how does it manifest physically?
yeah,
Right? Where is the connection? Where is that exact connection? I mean,
yeah,
it's when you really drop into it, it's like, oh my God,
yeah,
it's an unbelievable concept that we have this spirit enlivening us for our own soul.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are the mysteries, right? This is why, back to that question of what would I do with all the money in the world? Like the mystery schools were about educating people in the mysteries of life, like where did we come from? What is the soul? What is spirit? What is life? These are important things for every human being to question. And our education, modern industrial education, you don't go there at all. It's just they just parrot all this information. A lot of the information is totally false, like history, and you're just supposed to parrot it back, and then you get a grade, and then you get access to whatever higher realms of education at college or university. But in the mystery schools, it was about like taking you into these deeper questions. And I think they're very important questions because a lot of people are carrying this kind of existential nausea, around with them their whole life because they've never questioned these things. And then all of a sudden they're on their deathbed and they're like, oh my God, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm scared because no one's told me about the afterlife or about the soul or God. I haven't even thought about these things. And to me, it's important that we get people to ruminate on these things from a young age even. And it is happening. There's clearly a spiritual awakening happening on the planet. And more people are going into these things. And there's more and more teachers emerging and schools and programs. And that's wonderful. I like to tell people I feel like the whole earth has become a mystery school right now, thanks to the internet, which is like liberated all this knowledge. I mean, we're of the generations that remember analog. I remember when there was no internet. Like imagine like that world, and now it's like any spiritual text, I want to read, I just like boom, 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 and then doof, there it is. Now, of course, you run into the problem of like it is about embodying it, but it is amazing to think about these things. The Holy Spirit, soul, it is really, really interesting. And I mean, you mentioned soul, and I always go back to like I think Plato described the soul as like a field of energy that informs the body. It forms it, and it, as you say, it carries the frequencies of other lives, like the transmigration. We're on these like journeys, from lifetime to life. And it's funny because now science, through the work of Rupert Sheldrake and morphogenetic fields, they're starting to say the same thing. They're like, there's this like field of energy that is actually the essence of what builds the body. You can even see it through conception. When the embryo is forming, the first thing that happens is there's like the spark of light, which is the cell, which the Gnostics called the epinoa. It's that spark of source of our soul. And then the centriole forms, right? Which is like the column. And that's like the first thing that forms out of that spark of light. It's like zoom. And that's eventually becomes a spinal cord, but then it's a centriole, and then the field around the centriole, the circle. And that's, the beginning of things. So you can just see it from the get-go. Like it's right there. It's these mysteries are already solved. You just have to look deep into life and examine these things. And then I love the Holy Spirit because to me, the word spirit in ancient Hebrew was more a feminine word. And a lot of the work that I've been doing is reclaiming the divine feminine because we've been living in this world of like God and the masculine principle kind of being at the top. And even just like owning the whole experience of spirituality. Like the divine feminine has just been exiled. You don't see any writing on the goddess or the divine feminine that much in a lot of these holy texts. And, I've been really trying to get people to realize, well, the Holy Spirit is that, as you say, is that animating energy that pervades everything. And according to the ancient Gnostics, they said that was like the soul body of Mother Earth, this living light that when they would drink this kikion in these initiation ceremonies and they'd all of a sudden have this mystical experience and they'd see beyond the veils, they would see this light everywhere, flowing, moving, alive. And then they'd look at their hands and they'd see the light was in their bodies and they'd realize, oh my God, we're all living in this Holy Spirit. And that created a sense of unity consciousness, not by something they'd read, but something they'd actually lived, which is quite remarkable.
It's amazing. I find a person's metabolism. I've been
Mm.
doing it for 15 years, your actual frequency of your heart rate and brainwave rate where you're at peace.
Mm.
And I used to think, oh, the frequency of your soul must be where you're at peace in your body.
Mm.
And then a psychic said, no, that's your physical body, and your soul is a different note or frequency. And
Mm.
she said, you can see it in a person's eyes. And she said, you can even shine a light in the eyes and look at the reflection of the light through a prism and find its frequency. I'm like,
Wow.
whoa. I, because it's really, I mean, Alice Bailey says the whole thing is really to build the bridge of Antakarana to the soul so that the soul is actually guiding everything and the soul never wobbles. I don't believe in soul healing. I think it's perfect, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
now, instead of the emotional body being the guide, which
Mm.
is 90% of all people, that's
Mhm.
what's guiding everything, which is it's kind of a fun roller coaster, right? Now
Absolutely.
the soul is the guide.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and you know that a lot of that is like for me, the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle like is almost my Bible because he just explains present moment awareness as just accessing, I mean, he doesn't call it this, but I would say you're just accessing soul consciousness. It's this sense of holistic embodiment. You feel at one with everything, and it feels good. You feel this kind of joy that the Taoists called contentment, which to them was the highest joy. And it's interesting because contentment in ancient Chinese is zila, which means natural joy. It's like the joy of our very nature. You know, so like we chase all these highs when we're just programmed to be so emotional. Everyone's, oh, I want to live a happy life. You know, well, I just want to be content. You know, because happiness to me can be like a bit more erratic. You know, it's like this peak experience, almost ecstatic joy. But contentment's like kind of this quiet joy when you just sit in the park and you feel at one with nature and you just have this wave of just being at one with everything and everything is good, you know? That is beautiful. And that's kind of like the baseline of how the soul feels at all times. Because as you said, I share that belief. The soul is unsullied, you know? And when we distance ourselves from the soul and more get connected with the ego, which does take hits, which can get distorted, which can get wounded, then we sort of wobble a lot more, you know, and then we're more prone to letting the emotions, you know, lead us. You know, I theorize as well that the soul probably has more connection to that divine intelligence, you know, what they would call the logos, which is like more rationality. And I don't know if it was Alice Bailey, but I know some of these esoteric writers talk about how our emotional system is more the limbic system, which is the more ancient part of the brain, and our rationality is sort of this new ability as humanity has been divinized throughout our evolution that's been coming online, the ability to think very clearly about situations. And it's not about shirking emotions, but it's about realizing we have to bring them together. As one of my teachers said, we have to become rational mystics. You know, we have to realize our emotions are almost a primary intelligence. It's like, I feel something. And then when we sit with the emotion, rather than just letting it like move around and kind of like victimizing our consciousness, but when we sit and we get the message from that energy and motion, using our rationality, then we're actually marrying those masculine and feminine aspects of ourselves. And I think that's how we should be living a lot more. That's when people aren't no longer victimized by their
yeah,
emotions.
yeah.
You have to bring that clarity of the soul forward.
I love that. You know, it's interesting because you mentioned divine truth in your writing here, and people often think, oh, we're going more into the head, but it's actually not. and it's because a lot of people say, oh, truth is changing. It depends on the information. It's never, everybody has a different truth. But there is this really interesting truth that is it's a rational energy that comes, I don't even know how to explain it, rational energy that comes from source, where you know. And sometimes you know, and you think, oh, I know, but you don't know. And that's not it. And that happens a lot. People get guidance and they say, oh, Spirit says you should do this or we should do this. But then there's the one that's really clear that
Yeah.
is the divine truth. And it's a it's kind of beyond logic, but it's
Yeah.
tied to logic.
I agree. I've thought a lot about this because I am a believer that there is, yeah, truth. There is divine truth in our world, which kind of can trigger people because a lot of people, I think, have this notion of truth being very subjective. But I think there's like almost like a paradox as well, because I think there's a weaving of the subjective and the objective at a certain point, because it is a non-dual thing. But I do feel that there are just truths that I think we can all understand as truth. And I think one of the disingenuous things about our current reality, with all the political nonsense that goes on in our reality and all the different religions and all the different belief systems, is that people deny what is true in the world. I mean, we see this all the time with the media and the manipulations, that happen. There's a lot of deception, and the deception is almost part of how politics work, like the lies are done to get votes, to do this. And I think that's a tremendous disservice because it's actually also made people question their ability to feel truth. Because in an authoritarian system, you're also sort of set up that the authorities hold the truth, and then we look towards them for the truth, and we vote these people in, we trust these people. But we're now in an age where all of that trust has been so broken, especially with the media, that people are like, I did a talk in this during the pandemic called Living in a Post-Truth World, because I think we're now living in this world where people feel so betrayed. They're like, well, I'm not going to listen to the news anymore. I'm not going to listen to the politicians. But then I'm all of a sudden in this like stage where like nothing is true and everything just seems, and that's a necessary stage, I would say, to go through, because once that happens, there's this instinctual part in the human being that needs truth. It's truth is the North Star, like guides you in your life. And eventually people are going to be like, well, I need truth. I need to find it. So they'll start finding more reliable sources. They'll start to realize, well, I need multiple sources of information, especially if it's talking about the news. And then I think the deeper thing is you start to realize, like, wait, I can actually feel truth. And that's where it becomes a pairing of rationality and your feelings, because it's something that's like vibrational, actually. It's even beyond those things. It's just this feeling that you know that what is true, And according to the Gnostics, they really believed that the heart, which we now know through the Heart Math Institute, right, has the biggest vibrational field in the body. And they say it extends about 5 to 7 meters around us, but they say, our scientific instruments are not able to measure subtle energy. Hey, hypothetically, that field could extend infinitely. And that vibrational field of the heart is what is receiving and feeling truth. And we need to have more awareness of that and give more credence to our ability to feel truth on a vibrational level. And the Gnostics say that morality, for example, moral intelligence, what is right, what is wrong, is something that spontaneously emerges as a truth from the heart. And I often tell people this because one of my teachers told me this. He's like, if you go back to your whole life and you think about all the choices you've made, you've always known the right choice. You've always known. But the problem is sometimes that choice has been difficult to make, or it's something that you didn't want to do. You were resistant to it. So you chose something else, the playground of free will. But you did know, right? And we were all like, yeah, I've always just known. Whether it's like, what's for lunch today? Well, I could eat this or that. And if you just really tune into the heart, you kind of know, well, this isn't going to be good for my digestive taste, like a lot better, but like I'm going to eat this. And that's just the drama of life, is that we get to play in that because we get to deny truth. But I do think we're in an age where we're moving out of the post-truth age now, and more people are starting to come into this gnosis of like, wait a second, each of us can know truth for ourselves. And that's pretty profound.
It's such an amazing transfiguration what's happening with the politics. When you think of it, it's
Mm.
really unbelievably beautiful because
Mm.
it's driving everybody to question truth and
Yes.
feel it more.
Yes. And that's so needed. We need to go through this dismantling.
Cool, cool. So be still, make sound, wee, and ask that it
Mm.
opens up.
True. Yes. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I love it.
So you've got some sound you want to share. Tell us
Yes.
about it. What do you do?
So, what I'll be sharing with you is I'm going to basically just sing an invocation, which is just me channeling sound to create a sacred experience. I'll do like just a bit of guiding at the beginning to take us into our hearts. And then this will be my voice with some beautiful effects. And I'll be actually using a music production software called Ableton, and I'll be using a bunch of ambient drones that my friend Yaku has made. He's an amazing shamanic medicine producer. He produces beautiful ambient music, but also some kind of ethno beat dance music. And he's created this beautiful what is called a sample pack of ambient shamanic drones called Nectar of the Ancients. And I'll be slowly bringing some of those drones in as kind of the backdrop for my voice to sort of soar atop of them. And these sounds are going to really bring people into center, into an experience of the sacred.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all you do and what you bring forth.
Thank you, David. Thank you for all you do. It's an honor to be a part of this conference that's been so long standing, and I just love that you're helping to really push this paradigm of sound healing deeper into the world. You know, this is what's needed. We need to see this medicine as something so essential for the soul.
Nice. Let's get blissed out now.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, David.
Finding a connection to your life-giving breath, breathing in to the holy heart space in the center of your chest. Releasing a nice clearing sigh, and imagine that your heart chakra is shining with the light of your soul. And as I sing this invocation to Source, I invite you to listen from your sacred heart space. Sunna shine.